All the way down to the far end there, work our way past the recycling pond, tell you a little bit about those. See the sheep chalet down over there, and if the sheep are out, we'll visit them very briefly, tell you what they're about. Past the Petit Verdot, the freshwater pond here is fed from a spring over there, the winery, and then we'll show you the front part of the property before we take you up into the production area and the caves and so on. First of all, though, maybe just a little history to sort of get us up to date, yeah? The property here was first settled way back in the late 1860s, actually, by a German gentleman named Julius Wagner. He built a winery, a distillery, even ran a little resort here on the property. In fact, had as many as 17 buildings on the ranch by the late 1800s or so. Well, 3 events occurred over the years just to really change the area, not just here, but the whole area, really. First of all, in the late 1800s, there was an outbreak of phylloxera. Okay, that's a little root louse or bug that resides in the soils, feeds on the roots of the vines, can infect and kill them. Back in the last decade or so of the 1800s, it killed off about 90% of the grapevines here in Sonoma and Napa counties. Slowed things down. A lot. Just after that, the 1906 earthquake that devastated San Francisco shook things up pretty well here too. Really, that earthquake was a bit stronger in Sonoma than down in San Francisco. Now, there's certainly less to knock down. One thing it did do, though, was closed off a lot of our hot springs. A big draw here in Sonoma in the old days were folks coming up to take the hot mineral waters. Cold baths didn't seem to have the same allure. And if that wasn't enough, just after that, Prohibition started. That was the end of the wine. We get a lot of folks from out of the country. They just don't understand what in the world that was all about. That was the end of the winery business. By the 1920s, this property was abandoned. Mr. Wagner had passed away. His heirs really couldn't make a go of it anymore. They just packed up and left. So everything he'd done just sort of fell by the wayside. That's the way things sat here, abandoned and neglected for over 40 years until 1970. Now in 1970, Dr. Flynn from San Francisco purchased the property. He was, well, I guess kind of left over from the 60s. He established a little commune here. Didn't do too much with the ranch, really. He did try his hand at farming, I'm told, though. Toward the front there, he grew a few Cabernet vines. Toward the back here, a little alternative agricultural Probably heard of Sonoma Coma even back your way. It's another story for another day, I think. Now, in the meantime, Mike Benziger, the oldest of our 7 brothers and sisters, our boss. Mike graduated from Holy Cross College back there in Massachusetts, not too far from you guys there, Worcester or something like that, 1973. Took a little time out with his new wife, Mary, came west to check out California. Well, he got interested in the winery business and actually ended up with a job at one of our local wineries. It was over in Livermore in the East Bay, Stony Ridge. Well, he learned the business there and found out he had a real knack for it. He enjoyed it, so he stuck with it. And in his wanderings around Northern California, by this time he had a little scheme in the back of his head, I think, maybe a place of his own. Well, he discovered this property toward the latter part of the 70s and just fell in love with it. In fact, so much so that he made a deal with Dr. Flynn to buy the place. A little problem existed, though. He really didn't have any money. What's a guy in his 20s going to do when he needs financing? Probably going to phone home. And he was lucky. His father, Bruno, was back there in White Plains running the family import business called Park Benziger. Since the 1800s, they had this little business. They started, I think, with Bibles and bric-a-brac from Switzerland. Well, in the more recent years, I think their biggest import was Harvey's Scotch. So anyway, he talked his dad into coming out. You can kind of imagine the conversation. Hi, Dad. It's Mike. Yeah, how's Mom? Yeah, good. Listen, Dad, I think we should sell the family business, move to California, and be farmers. Yeah, Bruno was here in about 12 hours, I understand. To rescue Mike from whatever he was getting into in the hills around here. Anyway, actually Bruno fell in love with the place too. Within a year or so, they had sold their interest back in White Plains. By the end of 1980, 4 generations of the Benzigers had moved into that old ranch house that you saw down below there, right where we left in the tram just now. And when the family bought the place and moved in, that old house was really all that was left here. Things having been abandoned all those years. All these grapevines that we're looking at, and everything I'll be showing you during the tour today, the production facilities and the caves, the winery, and well, all new since 1980. Now in 1981, just the year after the family got here, they decided they wanted to make some wine. They arranged to buy some grapes and produced about 3,000 cases of wine under the Glen Ellen label. Now that was a label they purchased along with the property back then. It was pretty much an unused label at that point. Well, within 10, 11 years, they built the Glen Ellen label up to about 4 million cases a year. And then in 1993, they sold that to Hubline, one of the corporations. What they kept, their upper end, the Benziger Family label, and this property. And this, along with the 45 contracted growers they have here in Sonoma County, they've been running with ever since. Keep busy. Brings us to the current day. Now, of these 85 acres, Oh, about 45 of those are planted in grapevines. We are pretty much farming the whole 85 acres though, and that we'll be talking about as I take you through the property. The Benzigers are very proud of the fact that this is a Demeter certified biodynamic farm, which most people haven't heard of. Fewer than 30 vineyards in North America so far have the certification, and it's only probably 85 or so worldwide, something like that anyway. So we're going to talk about that as we take you through. Now we're located here in what's known as the Sonoma Mountain Appellation. It's the second smallest of the 14 designated growing regions, or American viticultural areas, now in Sonoma County. Named after Sonoma Mountain right above us there. Actually, we're sort of sitting here on the lap of Sonoma Mountain, maybe a third of the way up. This property has been divided up as well into 30 what we call flavor blocks. There are actually 30 little mini vineyards here that are farmed separately. The grapes are picked separately. The wines produced separately too from each of these 30 flavor blocks. These are what our winemakers use when blending our estate wines before bottling. The nice part about this tour is we're going to be tasting, I think, 4 or 5 of the estate wines with you before I turn you loose. And these are wines that are only available here. If it says estate on the label, then by law, of course, anything having to do with alcohol, firearms, or tobacco, the feds got their fingers in it. And so most of the things on the label on a bottle of wine very strictly regulated. Estate means 100% from this estate, from the family